So I wrote on Art of Transatlantis that I've been surprised to find that living as male in society isn't exactly how I would have predicted it. I mean, being male and what is considered masculine varies a lot depending on the social context. And someone asked me to kind of talk more about that, so I thought I'd make a video. The first thing that I want to just start this out by saying is that when I first started my social transition, my friends, really well-meaning people were always policing my gender. And by that I mean if I were, say, like dancing along to like a Lady Gaga song or something, people would be like, "Oh, are you sure you want to do it that way? Because if you want to be a guy, you want to do it this way." And especially cis male friends that I had would say that a lot. And I think it was very well meaning, but the whole if you want to be a guy, it was very common. And um, I kind of thought that being living as male in society was going to just be like that all the time. And part of the reason I thought that is that I heard, and I know a lot of people here, that like men are very competitive and they are always calling each other, um, derogatory terms in order to police each other's genders, and they're not allowed to cry, and just all of these things. I'd heard all that, and I just figured that it would be very hard for me to fit in as a guy, given um, a lot of the things that I do, or my more feminine traits. So when I actually started being read as male more consistently, and especially now, more recently that I've been stealth for about um, almost a year now, I've noticed that that actually decreased. And I think that part of that has to do with how people police your gender when you're trans versus how people police your gender when you are not being read as trans. So that's a big part of it. But the guys that I have sort of um, had the most experience with, within my social circle and everything, have not really policed my gender much at all. Don't seem to, give a shit whether I'm, crossing my legs in a feminine manner or whether I'm talking too much or, any of these things. They just don't seem to care. And I have had some people make some comments like, um, you, but very small comment. I mean, infrequent comments. Like once I complimented a girl's purse and I said, "Oh, is that Vera Bradley?" And one of the guys was like, "How do you know about Vera Bradley?" Like, that was like the only time I can think of that happened, and brushed it off easily. It was no big deal. Not very common. Uh, and I also haven't felt pressure to really fit into any kind of norm. I mean, I have fit in a little more, just because I am very socially anxious. I want to fit in. I want social situations to not be awkward. But I don't find myself consciously having to think about it very much. And part of that might just be because I'm used to it. But I do notice, I mean, I have not really changed the way that I walk or talk or anything. I consciously. I still very much am just being myself, and for the most part, it's been fine. What I meant when I said that masculinity and what being male means, it's different in different social contexts, kind of is related to that. And that's that, I am in graduate school in a social science department. I have to say the norms there are very different than, for instance, if I were working in a blue collar factory or if I were living in France. I mean, like, every single, part of my social context affects what my social role is. And one of the reasons I picked out like France is that in France, like from my experience anyway, men are much more like touchy feely and much more. It's more acceptable to be really into your appearance and fashionable and all these things. And I live in the Midwest, and like guys just it's not as accepted to do any of those things. Men don't hug as much, and men don't. You're not supposed to care about your appearance very much, or any of those things. And then being in grad school, being in a social science department, the norm is that like you're supposed to be really open to a lot of different things. That doesn't mean that people are, but people would look down on other people who are overtly policing each other's gender or overtly, being you know, um, misogynistic or all of these things. Doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but it does mean that, for instance, when that person made the purse comment about policing me knowing the brand of purse, people didn't like jump in and agree. They were just like, you know. And like I said, a lot of this has to do with my social context because I think that people would be policing my gender a lot more, and I would be being held to different standards if I were in a fraternity with I know there are nice fraternities out there, but like a very traditional fraternity, or if I were in high school, I mean, like if I were a jock, like all of these different things, there are all these different standards, but being a nerdy kind of like effeminate guy is more accepted where I am. So that was a surprise to me because I expected that I was going to be that people were going to be like, wow, he doesn't like sports, he doesn't like blah 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 blah. But in my experience, people have been like, "Oh, you don't like sports? That's fine. What do you like, comic books or something?" It's like fine. So that's kind of what I meant by that. And I might make a follow-up video about other things involved with masculine, maybe male privilege or something. But I just wanted to get that out there about my experiences, how it's felt living as male in society so far.